Storytime on when I caught my stepdad abusing my mom. So a little background information, men are trash, and I was 13 and in 7th grade. Well, it was my birthday and my mom took me to the shoe store to get some new shoes, and I saw this guy keep staring at my mother. So I pulled my mom aside and whispered to her like, hey, there's some dude staring at us, because low-key he looked creepy as hell. Well, apparently he wasn't creepy. He came up to my mom and started talking to her, and he was flirting with my mom a lot, so I grabbed a random pair of shoes and told her I was ready to go. Her and I walk up to the register. I think the conversation is over with her and James, but then he's like, oh, like, let me pay for that. Next thing you know, they exchange numbers and I start seeing him a lot more. And my mom seemed very happy, like she was smiling 24/7. So fast forward, we all move in together and I got a job. Well, my best friend Kayla was 17 and she had her driver's license. Like for part 2. Part 2 about when I caught my stepdad abusing my mother. So like I said, we all moved in together. My mother was super happy and I had a job. My best friend would come and pick me up after this job and I would usually get off work around 7 p.m. Well, around this time, James would have already been at work. He usually started work at like 6 o'clock, but every time that I would come home, my mother would be crying in her bedroom. So I ended up telling my best friend about it, and she said that she would come and get me early the next day from work, so that way we could possibly see what was happening while I wasn't there. So fast forward the next day, Kayla come and gets me early from work. She pulls around the corner, and we walk to my house because they would have seen her car if we parked on the street. I quietly unlock the door. My best friend and I go upstairs. We hear my mom screaming in pain, and the bedroom door was wide open. He was hitting my mother, so I kind of whispered to my best friend to take a video while I called the cops. He ended up going to jail, got a restraining order, and now my mom and I are living in a new house.
Am I wrong for telling my new coworker it was misleading of him to be wearing a wedding band when he's a widower? Oh, yeah, I'm already saying you're the asshole and I haven't read this yet. Hi, a couple of weeks ago, we had a new employee hired at the company. He's a good guy and a widower, named James, 36, and to my knowledge, his late wife passed away 8 months ago. I like how she just calls him widower, like, leave him alone. Me, 32 female, and the other coworkers got along well with him. However, I noticed that he is still wearing his wedding band on his finger. It kind of confused me a bit, and I couldn't help but bring it up to him while on lunch break. We talked, and I pointed out that he was being very misleading by still wearing his wedding band when he's a widower. Why does she keep saying that, and why is it any of your business? He looked quite bothered by what I said, but I tried to explain that I think that he was giving people the wrong idea or impression about his relationship status since he's technically single and on his own right now. Don't want to sound cruel, but I'm speaking from technical angle. James said that he didn't give it much thought, meaning he doesn't care what people think, and that even if he wasn't wearing his wedding band and some women approached him, he'd still turn them down since he's obviously not interested. Why did this woman care so much about this dude? For some reason, things got awkward and everyone stopped eating and just stared at James and me. I told him I don't know, but that really felt generally misleading of him, as in making people think he is in a relationship, married when he is not, regardless of how he felt about being in a relationship. Oh my gosh, what is wrong with this woman? Like, why do you care if he, like... He's going to work. He's not going there to find out what. Ah, yuck, ew. He got upset, called me rude, and said that I repeatedly disrespected his marriage and his late wife's memory with what I said, and took his stuff and walked away. No shit, like, you're rude as fuck. My coworker said, regardless of who was right or wrong, you're wrong, 100%. You don't. Who the fuck are you? There was no reason for me to bring this up in the first place and cause a scene and make James upset. Now he's not speaking to me and the others who have sided with me. So, am I the asshole? Did I overstep or did he overreact? Like, that's the most insensitive, intrusive thing I've ever heard. Like, who the fuck are you?
Storytime about how I got stuck in an elevator with my ex and we ended up doing the dirty. My ex and I broke up in 2020 during COVID. Disclaimers, not my story time. I was sending me on Instagram. Our relationship was really toxic. You know, the usual. He was super controlling, jealous. He would try to control everything I did, who I would hang out with. And he even envied my career. After dating for 6 months, I told him that we should reevaluate our relationship. I actually had no intention of breaking up with him. I literally just wanted us to sit down and talk about our relationship, talk about what we wanted for it, and if we could see ourselves together in the future. Well, he took this as me saying that I wanted to be with other guys, so he instantly broke up with me and gave me no chance to talk. He told me I wasted his time, and that he had rejected really hot girls in order to stay faithful to me. I knew this was a sign that we shouldn't be together, so I simply let him leave. A few days after that, he started sending me messages on Instagram asking me why I was going out. I told him he needed to remember that he was the one that broke up with me, and that he had no right to ask me anymore what I was doing or who I was hanging out with. Then he sent me a drunk voicemail telling me that he would never find anybody like me, which he's totally right about, and for me to give him another chance. This is when I had to make a really hard decision. I chose to block him, delete his phone number, and delete him out of my life. I decided to work on myself, so I started going to the gym every single day. A few weeks later, I'm on the treadmill and I see my ex walk in. He knew that was my gym and he signed up to it. I won't lie, I was really flattered. The first thing he did was come up to me and try to strike up a conversation. I really had to resist the temptation to talk to him. I told him that right now wasn't a good time since I was working out. I started seeing him every single time I went to the gym after that. Part 2 is up. Part 2 of how I got stuck in an elevator with my ex and we ended up doing the dirty. Started seeing him at my gym every single day, and at the same exact times that I went. Like I said in part 1, our relationship had always been really toxic, so I wouldn't have put it past him to start stalking me. Even though I had done a lot of work to get over him, part of me still really liked him. Every time I would see him, I would get butterflies, and I was actually flattered by the fact that he was following me around, which I know sounds terrible. But every time he would try to talk to me at the gym, I would just politely tell him it wasn't a good time, which he surprisingly respected. So the gym I go to is actually pretty fancy. There's all these different classes, so I decided to sign up to a few. Well, the instructor of this class was really good looking. After every single class, the trainer would always try to talk to me. Every time he would pass by me at the gym, he would say hello and just talk to me. And of course, I would literally sit there and have 5-minute conversations with him, whether or not my ex was around. After about a week of me talking to the trainer, I get a message from my ex on Instagram. He starts asking me if I'm interested in the trainer, and of course I said no. I told him that he needed to leave me alone and stop watching me at the gym. That's when he confessed his feelings and told me that he was still in love with me, and that he would do anything to get back with me. Luckily, I stayed strong and told him that I needed him to respect my space. The following day when I saw him at the gym, he tried to give me a hug. It was super awkward and I actually told him not to. The trainer came up to me and asked me if everything was okay in front of my ex. My ex, of course, started telling him that he needed to mind his own business. I could tell that the trainer was jealous and I could tell that my ex was jealous. It was super awkward, but I felt really flattered. And it made me really happy that my ex was starting to see the value in me, although it is sad that it took this to make him realize it. Luckily, things didn't escalate, but my ex pretended to leave the gym. When I left the gym later on, my ex was parked next to my car waiting for me. He tried to talk to me, but I just told him I didn't have time. That's when he went in for a kiss. I turned my face away, but he grabbed me and kissed me anyway. He told me that he wouldn't stop trying to win me back and that I was the love of his life. Part 3 is up. Part 3 of how I got stuck in an elevator with my ex and we ended up doing the dirty. After he grabbed my face and kissed me, I told him that he needed to back off. He told me that he wouldn't stop fighting for me and that I was the love of his life. I got in my car and went home. The very next day, I decided to go to the gym earlier just to avoid my ex. But what do you know? 10 minutes after I arrived, my ex shows up too. I decided I would literally not even make eye contact with him just so that he wouldn't come talk to me. I did a 30-minute workout and I started heading out of the gym. To get to my car, I had to take an elevator down. I get into the elevator and as the doors are closing, my ex sticks his hand in. He comes in and asks me if we could talk. I told him no once again. That's when he pressed the stop button on the elevator. I didn't freak out right away because I didn't think the elevator would get stuck. I decided to give him a chance and I heard what he had to say. Basically, he told me that he loved me and that he wanted to try to make things work again. I told him that I would think about it, but he needed to let me leave. I pressed the button on the elevator, but it wouldn't go. That's when we realized we were stuck in the elevator. Neither of our phones got signal, so there was no way I could call the gym or anybody in the building to help us. Before I knew it, a whole hour had passed and we were still stuck there. That's when my ex started begging me to kiss him. I kept saying no, but that didn't stop him. He went in for the kiss and it just didn't stop. And, you know, we did it. Luckily, someone let us out of the elevator a few minutes later. Long story short, we got back together after that. Now I'm having all these doubts. He's trying to be better, but I can tell he still wants to control me. I want to set boundaries with him, but I don't know how. Also, the trainer is still showing interest in me. What should I do?
My BFF became fake after becoming popular, so I became her karma. Let's name this girl Brittany. Me and Brittany were BFFs since we were 5 years old, and we did everything together. We vowed to never change upon each other once high school came around, but I guess she didn't keep her end of her word. Suddenly, when high school came around, this huge popular girl group seeked her out. Their names were Kelly, Savannah, Rachel, Chloe, and Julissa. It started out with subtle things, like them giving her compliments, and them wanting to work with her as a partner in class. And it even went as far as them bringing her to her lunch table, but I wasn't allowed to come, and they made this very specific. Brittany asked me if it was okay just for this one time, and I agreed. And then another time, and so forth. It kept happening. So one day, she walks into school with all of them, and you will not believe what I saw. Follow for part 2. Part 2 of my BFF became fake after becoming popular, so I became her karma. So she walked in with the 5 girls and the 5 most popular boys in school. I went up to her to say hi, but she completely brushed me off and ignored me. Her friends made some snarky comments as I walked by too, and I was so confused. Over time, she just distanced from me and she completely stopped talking to me after a while. So I decided to honestly just move on. There was nothing I could do about it, and I'm not chasing after someone for a friendship. That's not even wanted. So a new transfer boy came in. Let's call him Sky. Sky was immediately labeled as one of the cutest boys in school. And me and him started talking and we had a lot in common. We actually started dating. But for whatever reason, Brittany kept staring at us. One time we were walking down the hall and she actually walked up to him, and you will not believe what she said. Follow for part 3. My BFF changed after getting popular, so I became her karma, part 3. So she ended up walking up to Sky and said, "Looking good today." I just gave her a dirty look because I didn't know what she was plotting. Why are you going up to my boyfriend and trying to speak to him? You know what I mean? So after that, I would walk in the halls and notice she would always be talking to Sky. And whenever I would come around, she would just end up running away. So a week later, I come into school and everyone around me is just whispering and gossiping and looking at me. So I go up to Sky and ask what everyone's problem is. He says he has something to confess. He said he had cheated on me at a party. And I paused and figured it out. He cheated on me with Brittany. So basically my plan was to follow Emma home and beat her up, but she actually ended up going to Planned Parenthood for whatever reason. So when she came out, she threw a bag into the garbage can. I looked into the garbage can and it turns out these were test results. She had chlamydia. So I took a picture and sent it to everyone on Snapchat. I guess we'll see what happens at school tomorrow. Do you think the person in the story was in the right? Let me know in the comments down below. My father was the reason my mother and my sister were murdered and I don't know what to do. So I grew up in a perfect household. My mother and my father were married, and me and my sister were pretty good kids. There was only a 3-year age gap between me and my sister. So we had some stuff in common, but not everything, you know? So one day we had a family dinner and I noticed my mom's phone was buzzing a lot. And my dad was glaring at her, giving her dirty looks. Now this definitely threw me off because my father was never an aggressive person, especially towards my mother. He was kind of like perfect, very peaceful, always wanted to solve problems, and respected people's boundaries and time. My mom kind of started to look nervous, but she didn't really show it, but I could sense it. And me and my sister just looked at each other confused. But my sister looked like she knew something. So after the dinner was over, my sister pulled me to the side and took me to her bedroom. She told me she had extremely unfortunate news about Mom, and that it was important that I know. I was confused, but you will not believe what she said. Make sure to follow for part 2. My father was the reason my mother and my sister were murdered, and I don't know what to do about it. So my sister pulled me aside into the bedroom and told me that she had some unfortunate news she needed to tell me. And she told me that she thinks Mom is having an affair on Dad. I told her, why would she think this in the first place and what evidence does she have? So she was being nosy and actually going through Mom's text. And they were flirting and stuff like that. And she thinks that Dad knows and she doesn't know what he's going to do because he's so nice and we've never seen him mad before. And that's why she's scared. So I just brushed it off and I told her to ignore it. A couple of weeks go by, my mother and my sister went out to go shopping. I was asleep, so they didn't bring me. So when I woke up, I went downstairs to my dad telling me that he had to tell me something. I asked him what was wrong and I told him where Mom and Sis was. I kid you not, the way he looked at me sent shivers down my spine. And you will not believe what he said next. Make sure to follow for part 3. Part 3 of my father is the reason my mother and my sister were murdered and I don't know what to do about it. So my dad gave me the coldest look ever and he sat me down explaining that he had bad news. I asked where Mom and Sis were, but he basically had said they got into a car crash and they didn't make it. He had went to visit them in the hospital and they were doing perfectly healthy, but they both had a heart attack for whatever reason. I was very confused because how can you have a heart attack from healing from a car accident? It didn't make any sense to me. So I ended up breaking down and crying, and it took me about 3 months to be stable, not having a breakdown every 5 seconds, and I really thought about it. And I was actually in health class one time, and for whatever reason, I think a student was asking the teacher a question, and the teacher had explained that if a bubble is in your IV, you can get a heart attack from it. And it started to make sense, and I put the pieces together, but I don't have enough proof. What should I do? Let this person know in the comments down below. Follow for more story time.
Story time about how I got catfished by my best friend. Disclaimer, this is not my story time. My now ex-best friend and I hung out almost every single day. We were super close. Let's call her Natalie. Natalie and I would sometimes get into drama and her mom didn't like this. She considered me a bad influence on Natalie. But honestly, the drama was coming from both sides. Natalie and I had a group chat with one other person. One day, Natalie sends me a message through the group chat saying that she couldn't be my best friend anymore and that she's really sorry. She really didn't explain why though. I was crushed. She had been my best friend for so long. 3 weeks ago, I noticed that someone added me on Snapchat by search. I didn't really think too much about it. I added them back and we started having a conversation. She was a young girl my age and we started having conversations about boys we had crushes on, school, and lots of other things. I asked her to send me a picture of herself and she said she couldn't. That should have been the first red flag. Then we decided to meet up at the mall. I wait for her at the mall, waiting for this girl to show up, but she never does. Disclaimer, this is not my story time. Like I said before, this girl told me she couldn't send me any pictures, so I didn't even know what she looked like. That's when I started suspecting something. We got along so well in our Snapchat conversations, it was almost too good to be true. So of course, I decide to call her. And guess who answers? Natalie, with her new friends who she knows that I hate. At that moment, I realized that she dumped me and then got with these new girls that she knew I hated. Of course, I was furious. I wanted to say something, but before I could, Natalie hung up the phone. And of course she did. She knew I was going to go off on her. Well, I start calling Natalie's phone several times, and she doesn't answer. Then I see that she unadded me off Snapchat and blocked me. So now I have no way of getting in contact with her. I spent weeks talking to this girl only to find out it was my ex-best friend catfishing me. So, of course, I drive all the way to Natalie's house and her mom answers.
So I
Part
showed
3
to
my ex-best friend's house who's been catfishing me for weeks. Disclaimer, this is not my story time. Her mom was not happy to see me. Like I mentioned before, Natalie's mom thought I was a bad influence on her because we always got into drama. I proceed to tell Natalie's mom everything, in detail. Her mom was shocked. She couldn't believe that her little daughter would be capable of such a thing. She was so mad, and it was so satisfying to me. I leave Natalie's house and I go home. The next day, I see that all of Natalie's new friends are posting on their social media saying that Natalie's phone got taken away for a few months, and that whoever did it, F you. I know they know it's me. It turns out Natalie's mom took her phone away for a whole month and deleted all of her social media. She totally deserves it. Natalie and her new friends are in a different school. And here's the kicker, I'm gonna be going to the same school. Now I'm just hoping they don't try to do something to me. And if they try, I'm so
Around
ready.
13, my friend Sally and I were having a sleepover. I met her in the beginning of my first year at a new school. She was older than the other kids in our grade and was considered one of the popular kids, which is what I think drew me to her at first. It was your typical Friday night. We carpooled to her family's apartment after school. Her family was pretty religious and wouldn't let us watch horror movies, so we ended up watching Hunger Games instead. After the movie, Sally and I were hanging out in a room, listening to music and giving each other makeovers. By the end of it, we were looking much older than what we really were. Sally wasn't the most positive influence. Despite being my bestie at the time, she was manipulative and got off on putting me down. She also had a habit of talking to men online and lying about her age. She showed me some texts between her and a guy that she was talking to, which mostly consisted of him trying to convince her to meet up with him and the usual online creep stuff. According to him, he was 19. However, looking at the picture that he sent, this man was clearly at least 40 and looked like he lived in his mother's basement. Suddenly, we got a call from him. Sally answered without hesitation and I heard him say, "You're so pretty, why don't you come meet me?" Sally said she couldn't because she was spending the night with her friend. This sparked his interest. That's when he proceeded to try and ask us both to meet him. Sally, lacking any common sense, said yes. Part 2 of why you shouldn't sneak out. She planned for us to sneak out and walk 15 blocks to meet this creep in a deserted McDonald's parking lot. I didn't want to go, but Sally adamantly pleaded, saying that she didn't feel safe going by herself, so I agreed. We took our phones and I stuffed a kitchen knife in my bra in case something went wrong. The route we took was dark and deserted. When we got to the parking lot, we saw a beat-up Toyota Corolla. From what I could tell, there was more than one person inside. The man from the picture got out and left the door open behind him as he approached us. I turned on my flash to see and I could tell he was on something. His eyes were so wide they looked like they were about to pop out of his head. I suddenly became conscious of how big he was. He was about 6'2" and around 280 pounds. Sally and I were both significantly smaller than him. That's when he reached out and grabbed Sally by the arm. His friends got out of the car and he invited us back to the car for booze and drugs. I quickly took my knife out and when he saw it, he released her. I pulled Sally by the arm and ran faster than I ever had in my life. When we got to her home, we locked the doors, closed the blinds, and didn't sleep all night as we peeked out the window in case they followed us. To our dismay, this same Toyota was circling around her apartment building not once, not twice, but 3 times. After this, Sally and I stopped talking because she was mad at me for ruining her night. However, I think it was for the best.
This is a story of the time that I caught my neighbor's mom talking smack about me. So I don't know about you guys, but every single Wednesday in my middle school, we would have a bagel sale. And some people's parents would come in to help out. And my neighbor's mom was one of those parents. And I had a best friend at the time whose mom would also work at the bagel sales. But this best friend of mine, her mom never let us hang out with each other because she felt that I was a bad influence on her. When in reality, it was the complete opposite. She was the one that snuck the boys in her house, if you guys remember that story time, where they peed in a flower pot. So basically her mom wouldn't let us hang out. And sometimes my friend would go with her mom in the morning, basically as a ride to school, and to help out with the bagels too. And one day when she went in with her mom, my neighbor's mom also was there too. So my friend starts eavesdropping into their conversation, and my friend's mom brings me up and says how much of a bad kid I am and a bad influence. And my neighbor's mom was like, "Oh wow, that's my neighbor. Like we always suspected something bad about her. Our whole entire neighborhood knows this about her." Basically making stuff up about me. So then I go home crying, tell my mom. Part 2 of catching my neighbor's mom talking smack about me. So my best friend tells me all these things that my neighbor was saying about me, obviously. And I got really upset, so I went home and I just started to cry. Because for some reason I felt like when I was younger, every one of my friends' parents hated me. And I never really knew why. I was always the type of person to let my friends do whatever they want and encourage them in doing whatever they want, whether that's breaking the rules or following the rules. So I mean, I guess that could be something, but I'm just being a supportive friend, sorry, I got off topic. So when I told my mom, she was like, "Okay, come with me, I'm gonna knock on her door." And I was like, heck no, I do not feel like dealing with this. Mom, you deal with it. So she calls her up on the phone, puts her on speakerphone, confronts her about the situation, and this lady starts going on about how she loves me like I'm her own child, saying that I was never a bad influence on her daughter, and that she actually wanted me to hang out with her daughter more. That's not what she was saying at bagel sale.
Story time about one of the worst customers ever.
I got a new job at a coffee shop downtown. It was my first day out of training and I would be taking orders and making drinks on my own. I was a little nervous, but excited and ready to be by myself. Everything was going great until this woman came in. She came up to the counter and immediately noticed that I was new there. She said, "I'm a regular and come in almost every day. Write my order down and save it so I don't have to explain it to you again next time." At first I thought she was joking, so I smiled and laughed, but then I quickly realized that she wasn't kidding. She proceeded to order a very complicated drink, which I didn't mind. I was up for the challenge. I made her drink and handed it to her with a smile. Without even trying it, she said the color was off and requested I remake it. When I turned around to try again, she said, "Don't mess it up this time. It's not rocket science." I remade the drink, and this time she picked it up and looked at it, didn't try it, and complained that I put too much caramel in it and asked if I was trying to make her fat. I remade the drink a third time, doing everything she requested. This time she actually tried the drink and immediately spit it back into the cup. She then told me that I'm horrible at my job, called me incompetent and lazy, and of course, asked to speak to my manager. It only got worse from here. Part 2 of the worst customer ever. After she requested to speak to the manager, I went to get the shift lead and explain the situation. He immediately knew what customer I was referring to. My manager went to speak to her as I remade her drink a fourth time. She demanded that the drink be free and that we also let her pick a food item on the house for wasting her time. When we refused, she went ballistic and started screaming that she would never come here again and that we lost a customer. She demanded that we get the owner of the store down here immediately and said that she wouldn't leave until the owner arrives. We told her that she would have to leave or we would call the cops. She continued screaming at us, took the drink without paying, and knocked over one of the displays on her way out. My manager said that this customer complained almost every day, told me I'm doing a good job, and thanked me for finally getting rid of a Karen. I couldn't believe my eyes when she came back a few days later. I was dreading having to take her order again. To my surprise, my manager confronted her about not paying the other day and knocking over our display. He then asked her to leave, but she went crazy again and refused to leave, and this time we did have to call the cops. Ultimately, she left before the police came and hasn't been back since. This is why you should choose your friends wisely. I work at a hotel and around 3 p.m. this guest came to check into her prepaid reservation. Despite it being prepaid, we have a $300 security deposit that's mandatory. Her card was declining for the deposit, so we couldn't check her in. She left around 4 p.m. and came back at 11 p.m. with her friend. Her friend spent $100 on an Uber to come to our hotel and put his card down for the deposit so that she could check in. Then he had to Uber back and spend another $100. The next morning, she brought me down a piece of paper filled top to bottom with her demands. She wanted her entire stay comped, additional nights comped in the future, and she wanted free room service. Her reasoning? We didn't let her check in due to her card being declined. We had a back and forth conversation about how I couldn't give her any of those things because her card declined. She kept saying things like, "So you're basically blaming me for everything?" and how she was a movie producer from London who was traveling, which is why her card declined. When she realized that I wasn't budging, she left the front desk. Luckily, that day was her checkout date, so we wouldn't have to deal with her for much longer. Or so I thought. She called a little later and asked for a late checkout. I told her I couldn't offer that to her because every room was booked up. She got mad and hung up on me. Around 11 a.m., security informed me that a guest was outside bothering the other guests. Part 2, why you should choose your friends wisely. While I'm walking over, a few hotel guests tell me that a crazy lady is bothering them. As I walk up to her, she's sitting with 2 random guests. I asked the gentleman if they're okay. They said, it's fine, we're okay. Which is when the lady tells me, "The only person bothering them is you." I ignore her and double check with the other guests who confirm that they're okay. That's when she says, "Bye, you can go now." To which I replied, "Remember, checkout is at 12. Oh, and if another guest complains about you bothering them, you'll be kicked out of the pool." Eventually, 12 p.m. checkout time hits. I send security to her room first as part of the do-outs. They inform me that her bags are all over the room, but she's not there. We smell cigarettes in her room, and after an inspection, find out that she's been extensively smoking in the room. That's a $500 fee. I authorize the $500 on her friend's card since it's the only one that we have on file. 1 p.m. hits, then 2, and finally she arrives at 6 p.m. I post a $300 checkout fee to her room as well, along with a resort fee totaling $850. When she came back, we told her we couldn't release her things until the cardholder signs authorization for the charges. This is when she throws a huge tantrum and leaves. However, why you should choose your friends wisely. The next day, I get a call from the crazy lady's friend asking why he's being charged $850. I tell him everything and he's in shock. He said that she's having a midlife crisis right now and her mental state isn't normal at the moment. He then said the $850 charge is outrageous, followed by not knowing what he signed up for when he put his card down. I told him that putting his card down for her was essentially him taking responsibility for her reservation. I explained that I feel bad about it, but charging his card wasn't my decision. I also said that since we couldn't release her items to her, her bags are still in the room. Also, that the card on file will continue to be charged for each day the bags remain in the room. We'll only move the bags out of the room once we get an authorization form signed for the charges. He said he'd gladly pay the $350 for the late checkout, but the $500 smoking fee was too much. He threatened to open a dispute with his bank if he's charged for the full $850. I spoke to my general manager and the most we could do was offer him 50% off of the smoking fee. I also let him know that if he tried to dispute the charges, the hotel would pursue payment in court. He ended up accepting and signing for the charges. We took her bags out of the room and the crazy lady came to pick them up at 3 in the morning. Overall, I just felt really bad for her friend. Storytime about my roommate's crazy girlfriend. I'm a lesbian living with my good friend who's a guy. I own the apartment and rent out the room to him. A month ago, he met a girl online and they started dating. She's constantly at our place and I'll be honest, I don't like her. She's always been incredibly rude and standoffish towards me. I eventually learned that it's because she thought I had a thing for my roomie even after he told her I was gay, to which she replied that I don't look gay. A few weeks ago at a kickback at our place, I pulled her aside telling her that I really am gay and I hope that we could be friends. She seemed to take this very well and was overly friendly with me for the rest of the night. The next day, my roommate wanted to talk to me saying that his girlfriend feels uncomfortable around me after I drunkenly hit on her. What? what? I wasn't drunk at all, and I'm not attracted to her whatsoever. I explained to my roommate what really happened, and he was skeptical, but took my word for it, chalking it up to a miscommunication. A week later, we had another kickback, and his girlfriend was there, of course. I was cordial, but stayed away so another miscommunication wouldn't happen. Towards the end of the night, another friend said to me, "Dude, what's going on? She's telling everyone that you've been hitting on her all night." I was pissed off and went up to her in front of everyone saying, "What the hell's going on? Why are you speaking lies about me hitting on you to all my friends?" Story time about how I simped over the pizza delivery guy. One weekend, my friends and I were having a girls' night sleepover. Girls' night always means movies, snacks, gossip, and pizza. We called our local pizza place and put in an order for way more food than we actually needed, as we always do. Our order was running late that night, and we were starting to get mad because we ordered over an hour and a half ago. The girls and I started joking about how we were going to tease the delivery guy for taking so long. We weren't going to be mean, of course, no Karens in my group, but we were getting hangry. Just as we were complaining about where the food was, the doorbell rang. We all ran to get the door, and when we opened it, I almost fainted. The most gorgeous guy ever was standing there with our now cold pizza. This guy didn't look like your typical everyday pizza delivery guy. He had a young Brad Pitt look going on, and I was into it. When he told me the total, I just stared at him speechless for a good 10 seconds. I paid the model pizza man and he left without me being able to say a single word from being so nervous. I told my friends that I had a crush, and they started hyping me up, telling me that I should have totally gotten his number. They told me that he was eyeing me back, but I didn't see it. I was thinking about him all night and regretting not shooting my shot. I know it sounds crazy, but the very next night, I called the same place and ordered another pizza for Part 2 of how I simped over the pizza delivery guy. I had to see this guy again, so the next night I mustered up the courage to call the same place and order another pizza for delivery. I spent a good 3 hours getting ready before calling because I wanted to make sure I was looking fine. I put on my best outfit, had a full face of makeup and everything. The time came and the doorbell rang. My heart started racing, so I took a deep breath and opened the door. I was instantly disappointed when I saw a different guy at the door with my delivery. I spent the whole day getting ready and rehearsing what I was going to say, only for it to be a different guy. I was so sad, I decided to eat my feelings and ate half of the pizza by myself while watching The Notebook. The next day, I woke up and decided that I was going to try again. There's no way I could strike out twice. I called up and put in another order for the third day in a row. The doorbell rang an hour later and it wasn't my crush again. At this point, I was in too deep to quit now, so the next day I called in and placed another order for the fourth day in a row. My fridge was so full of pizza that if it wasn't him this time, I was going to scream. Sure enough, I opened the door and it was him. He ended up speaking first and said, "Wasn't I here a few days ago? You must really like our pizza." My heart was racing, but I told him the truth and put it all out there. He gave me a weird look and told me he was engaged and quickly left. In the end, I was stuck with a week's worth of pizza, a bruised ego, and a broken heart.
Has anybody else been in a really toxic relationship and never noticed it until after the fact? Because same. I thought I would give you some examples and see if anybody else could relate. So I was dating this boy. We'll call him Eugene. Eugene ended up going on a cruise with his friends. And at this point in our relationship, I never suspected that he was cheating on me. So this is really where the toxic started. He goes on his cruise, called me every single day, and then I went to his house the day he came back. He was changing his shirt and I noticed that he had a hickey on his neck. I was like, what is that? Because he was gone for over a week. Eugene says to me, "Yeah, I was sitting in the jacuzzi and my boy pointed it out to me. It was like, yo, what is that?" And I was like, yo, I don't know. What the heck? Mia's gonna think this is a hickey. And I was like, okay. So we're watching a movie and he falls asleep. So I took that opportunity to look through his phone. And this was the first time that I ever thought to go through his phone. And I see that he has a streak with a girl. So I investigate, find her Instagram, and I DM her and I'm like, "Hey girl, I'm coming to you as a woman. How do you know Eugene?" Has anybody ever been in a toxic relationship and never realized it until after the fact? Because same. Part 2. So I look through his phone and I find that he has a streak with a girl for 3 days. So I investigate, find her Instagram, and I DM her. And my 15-year-old self was like, "Hey girl, woman to woman, how do you know Eugene? I see that you guys have a streak. I'm his girlfriend. So I just want to know if there's anything going on." And originally she denied it and said that she was talking to his friend. But I kept grilling her. I was like, his friend has a phone, so why are you Snapchatting Eugene? So then finally I asked her if we could FaceTime. She said yes. So we FaceTime and she starts spilling the beans. She said that they've been Snapchatting for 2 months, that she slid up on his friend's story asking who he is and what's his Snap. So we gave it to her. He would slide up on her story with hard eyes and talk about meeting up. And she said that she knew he had a girlfriend, but he said it wasn't that serious and that I was cheating on him, which I wasn't. She said he would block her every single time I would come over. I asked her what high school she went to. She was in 7th grade.
Crazy ass story time about how my best friend's parents walked in on me sleeping with my best friend's brothers. And yes, I said brothers. So my freshman year, I became best friends with this girl. And she had 2 older, hot-ass brothers. One was in college, and one was a senior. Well, it was Christmas break, and her older brother from college was home. And my parents let me go with them to Florida for Christmas break. They had a super nice beach house, and I was sharing a room with my best friend. And the boys were sharing a room. And our room was connected because there was a bathroom in the middle. Well, my best friend got super sick the first 3 days of the trip, so she didn't do anything with us. So I was hanging out with the boys all the time. Well, the one night we were on the deck and we started to play Truth or Dare. And one of them asked, "Would you sleep with us?" And I said, yeah. So at around 3 a.m., I snuck into the room and things started to get real nasty. There are kids on this app, so just use your imagination. And things started to get really loud and we woke their parents up, like for part two. Part two. So we thought that we woke their parents up and we heard someone walking up the stairs. So I ran into the bathroom, hid, and they asked if everything was okay. And I was just like, oh, I'm not feeling good. I think I caught whatever my best friend has. So they went back downstairs and we thought they went back to sleep. They were never asleep. So we decided to go onto the deck and finish the nastiness that we were doing. And I was like, oh, okay, you know, like we don't have to be that quiet now. Because their bedroom was in the front of the house and the porch was on the back of the house. And we were on the second floor, and below that there was another porch with like a fire pit and everything. And I could see below us. Well, out of the corner of my eye, I thought I saw somebody walk into the house. But stupid me, I just ignored it. Not even a minute later, I hear the sliding door open. And I hear, and we all turn around and everybody's standing there. So they sent me home and told my parents. But I didn't get grounded because low-key my mom knew I was a hoe. Story time about my toxic ex-friend group. So my freshman year, I had moved to a new high school. So right away, I started being friends with this group of girls, and they were super nice. And I was also friends with this group of guys. Well, since I was friends with both groups, we all started hanging out all the time, but only whenever I was there. The boys just didn't want to hang out with the other girls. And after a few months, the girls started acting really strange. So anytime that I would hang out with the boys and not invite them, they would ignore me for a whole week. Meaning they wouldn't talk to me in school, they wouldn't answer my messages, or anything like that. Not a single one of them. And also, anytime that we hung out, they would be like, oh, invite the boys. And it was like they never wanted to hang out with me. So the one night, one of the boys was throwing a party. And I was going, and the girls asked if they could come. But they had drama with a lot of people, so the boys didn't want them coming. But I invited them anyways. Like for part two. Part 2 to the toxic ex-friend group story time. So, you know, I invited them to the party, they showed up, and they were being really rude and like standoffish the whole entire night. And these girls literally hated it whenever I would hang out with the boys or talk to the boys. Come to find out that every single one of the girls had a crush on every single one of the guys that were in my friend group. Also, I'm a very friendly person and will talk to anybody, and they got pissed off whenever I was talking to anybody who wasn't them. So a little bit into the party, I start getting a lot of dirty looks from a lot of different girls that I've never even talked to. And this girl walks up to me and she's like, why have you been Snapchatting my boyfriend? And I'm like, girl, what are you talking about? She goes, a few of your friends told me that you like my boyfriend and that you've been Snapchatting him and trying to get with him. So then she calls the girls over from my friend group and goes, didn't she tell me this? And they're like, yeah, she tries to get with everybody's boyfriend. So after that, I got kicked out of both friend groups because they spread a bunch of lies and rumors about me.
Story time about how I got a facelift when I was 18 to become a famous Instagram model. And I am a famous Instagram model. Can you guess who I am? Disclaimer, this is not my story time. This is not my story time. It was sent to me on Instagram. I grew up in the Kylie Jenner era when she started getting her lips done. Remember that? Kardashians were a Bible to me. I watched Keeping Up with the Kardashians and was totally obsessed with their looks. You see, at the time, I wasn't the prettiest girl. I was really skinny. I had no bum and no boobalas. Once Kylie Jenner started getting her body done, that's when I really started getting FOMO. To be honest, and I know this sounds cliche, but social media made me start hating my face. I would constantly compare myself to Instagram models. That's when I started photoshopping my pictures. It made me feel so much better to post. Then I begged my parents for lip fillers. They finally said yes, and I went ahead and got them. For me, the next logical thing was to look like Kylie Jenner. So I decided my parents to let me get surgery. They finally said yes, but trust me, it took a long time to convince them. We went to a plastic surgeon, and that's when I decided to get a full facelift. I know it sounds severe, but it was so worth it. But I didn't stop just at my face. I even convinced my parents to get my boobalas and my bum done part 2. After getting all my plastic surgery at 18, I finally became a famous Instagram model. Disclaimer, this is not my story time. This is not my story time. It was sent to me on Instagram. The healing process, of course, was painful, but it was so worth it to me. Once I saw my body and my face, I felt so much better about myself. But something else was missing. Everyone on Instagram was getting their brows tattooed and lash extensions. So I went ahead and got those things done too. And I started paying back my parents for all the surgeries. So this was my basic beauty routine. I would get a mani-pedi every 2 weeks. I would get my hair colored every single month. I was getting lip fillers every 6 months. Facials every 2 weeks. Personal trainer who I exercise with 5 times a week. And I forgot to mention, I had 100,000 followers on Instagram at this point. So I was getting a lot of brand deals aside from the modeling. That's when I started noticing that Kylie Jenner's butt was looking bigger, so I wanted to get mine bigger. I also wanted to get my hips wider like her too. I even started buying all the designer stuff that Kylie was wearing too. Part 3 is I asked my plastic surgeon to make my butt look bigger like Kylie's. Disclaimer, this is not my story time. It was sent to me on Instagram. By the way, at this point, I'd already had a full facelift and lots of body work done by the time I was 18. My plastic surgeon told me he wouldn't give me another round of butt filler. I was really upset. Then my parents asked me to come over. When I got to their house, they told me the plastic surgeon had called their house and told them that I was looking for more surgery. My parents were beginning to worry, but I assured them that everything was okay. I was not addicted to plastic surgery or anything like that. I just knew how competitive the modeling industry was. Instead, I decided to get filler in my face. I got my nose and my cheeks done. And that's when I started getting hired by more makeup companies. After a year, my Instagram following went from 100,000 to 1 million. I've modeled for over 50 brands and I'm currently planning my own brand. My Instagram followers are constantly accusing me of getting plastic surgery, but I've never admitted to anything. I'll come back to the comments and see if anybody guess who I am. I know people hate Instagram models because they never admit to it, but I will never admit to my plastic surgery. I mean, I'll probably have plastic surgery again. Have you guessed who I am?
Storytime. My manager became my stalker. 4 years ago, when I turned 16, I started working at Dunkin'. This was my first job, by the way. So my interview process was super easy. We probably talked for like 5 minutes and then he just hired me on the spot. When it came to training, he was the only one that could train me. And he told people not to teach me anything or to not even talk to me. So I found that weird. So this one day my dad texted me and obviously I went to go check my phone. And my manager was literally stalking me through the security cameras. I probably held my phone for 10 seconds. And he texted me within that same period of time to get off my phone. So I look up around me and I'm like, where is he watching me from? He's not even here. He was literally watching me from his house. Every little thing I did, he would text me about it. And then things got a lot weirder, like for part 2. Time my manager became my stalker part 2. Like I said, he was watching me through the security cameras on every little thing I did, and he would text me about it. At the time, I found that weird, but I found this weirder. He would text me all the time saying, oh, can you come into work today? Like, it's really busy and we really need you. So this was during summer, so I had all the free time. So I'm like, okay, I can come in. So I would come in and clock in. So as soon as I did that, he would send somebody home. He basically just wanted me there every day, even when they didn't even need me. And he would always constantly ask me if I'm hungry, because where my Dunkin's located, there's a bunch of food chains around it. And of course, I would always say, no, I'm okay, because I found it really odd. But not only that, he's also around the same age as my dad. So I just found everything really strange. He would text me even when I'm not at work. And this went on for 2 months until I finally quit.
Story time about why I beat up my best friend. So a little background information. Her and I had been best friends since we were in 7th grade. Her family was rich, mine was poor. And at first she was a really good friend. She was always there for me whenever I needed her. Until our freshman year of high school, which is when her and I started hanging out with boys. Now, my mom was kind of strict. She wouldn't really let me hang out with boys. But her mom was more lenient about her hanging out with boys. Every weekend, she would throw a party at her house. And she would throw them in her attic because 1, it was huge, and 2, her parents didn't give a fuck what she did up there. Anyways, she would always offer to do my hair and makeup before the party started. Which always made me really excited because I never really put any work into my physical appearance. Well, little did I know, the only reason why she would offer to do my hair and makeup at these parties was so that way she could make me look like shit in front of all the boys. So after that, I taught myself how to do my own makeup and do my own hair.
About why I beat up my best friend. So like I said, I learned how to do my hair and makeup, and she went on vacation for like a month straight. Well, when she came home, she threw another party, and she was like, don't worry, after I'm done getting ready, I'll do your makeup and do your hair. And I was like, no, it's fine, I got it. She literally looks at me and she goes, are you sure? You don't really know how to do that. Like, it'll probably look really bad. And I'm like, why the fuck would you say that? She goes, no, like, I don't mean it to be rude. It's just that, like, I want you to look good in front of the boys and stuff like that. Like, sis tried to talk me into getting a shower for a full, like, 20 minutes. So after that, the whole night, she's literally being a pick-me girl. She's making all these comments about me in front of the boys, and I just keep brushing them off until her next party. We got ready and I put on these expensive shoes that I had just bought, and she goes, wow, you just like really like to copy my style, don't you? So she starts making comments that whole night about how my family's poor and stuff like that, and she threw up all over my shoes. So I dumped the trash can that everybody had threw up in that night on her, punched her in the face, but like 2 months later she came to my house and apologized.